G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 19th of January 2026. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, and as you can see the war continues. I was just getting everything ready and I forgot to switch back to the main screen. Alright, so there's the war map. As you can see, Ukraine has been hit. Now, there was a large drone attack, but it was fairly concentrated in only a few areas. Of course, this follows a Ukrainian sabotage attempt in Donetsk. Drone attacks, versatile. So if we go around the map, darkness again tonight in Kiev. Kiev has lifted the curfew. We'll get to that later, but we have Sumy and Kharkiv bearing most of the brunt of Russia's ire, including, although they hit Odessa. Those are the ones who bear most of the brunt. There were some on Kiev. Now, of course, the Russians continue to expand their buffer zone, and they're expanding their hold on Kupiansk. But predominantly now they're clearing Ukrainians out of these fields and going to probably link up through here before they probably have to sweep through here and get the Ukrainians cut off completely. Otherwise, the Ukrainians scattered throughout the countryside will just keep coming back into Kupiansk every time. The Russians have to probably leave a large force there just to deal with the Ukrainians who keep coming in from the countryside. Pretty much a tactic the Russians were using against the Ukrainians. But remember, Russia has limited the number of soldiers it has in the special military operation, so it doesn't have that great a numerical superiority on the field. So it has to rely on wearing down the Ukrainians. So while Kupiansk and this region here remain bear traps, they're not the only ones. They closed the gap slightly on linemen, but haven't really made any significant progress. They've made a few advances here and there, but nothing really major. Mostly it is Ukrainians consolidating their forces, who seem to be preparing for some push on the linemen, Kononenska areas. And so far, they have been able to slow the Russians down completely. And of course, Russia having to put more men into the flanking maneuvers than they anticipated. They have not been able to advance fast in other areas, though they have advanced, and they're within artillery range of several areas, able now to harass the Ukrainian forward supply and command areas for the second Zelensky line, but they have not been able to crack the Ukrainians here. They've been able to wear down some in Myriad, but not all. And the bear trap remains in operation, trying to siphon Ukrainians off other areas of the battlefield, while they make modest gains in other areas. Though these modest gains do threaten to also grind to a halt. But they have made breakthroughs here and there, which have panicked the Ukrainians. Though they've only lost a little bit recently in Hulapol, they're still embarrassed that 3 Russians made them retreat in the first place. 3. A trick the Ukrainians are not likely to fall for again. But you never know. The Russians now have their own Paul Revere joke where they could say, what makes a Ukrainian retreat? Yell 3 times, the Russians are coming. But yeah, that's not going to happen again, maybe. But as you can see, most of the front is just a exchange of fire. The Russians talking with the Americans. The Ukrainians are talking with the Americans in Davros. Now, for some reason, the sticking point, of course, is the fact that Zelensky is managing everything. Nothing in Ukraine gets done without Zelensky in it. And, of course, what's the point of having a big government if it does nothing? And their air defenses, their artillery, everything's ineffective, right? But people keep watching, not me, but there are so many channels out there that people keep watching that are constantly bringing out lies. The latest lie, of course, is the Czech super weapon, the wonder weapon. It's going to break the Russians. 4 weeks ago, this artillery piece hit the front line. And what has it done? Yeah. Made Czechoslovakian artillery manufacturers rich. That's all it's done. Oh, and this turd, who glazes Ukraine, he's got his nose fair up Zelensky's butthole. But there's so many who think Zelensky walks on water, But every time it's a new artillery piece, a new drone, a new missile, serious air defense packages, Captain Sky Shield, this time we got them, And again, as predicted, the failure, right? These people I don't wish to sound dramatic, but they're assholes. But the majority out there want to be lied to. Now, there's no mockery or anything to be said, right? But this war has a lot of NGOs out there raising money for Ukraine. So there's no incentive to end the war. There's just so much corruption. But there's genuine moments of charity. But you don't know which is which anymore, right? Organisers raised 2 million pesos. How much of that went to the people? How much of that is just, spent in Europe anyway, or in Poland? Now, Russia's attack on Ukraine, finally they admit that they're targeting infrastructure. But most of the time, they're just putting out bullshit propaganda. Now, if you can't see it, that's fine. Most people don't. Look. There's the skybeam effect. You don't see it yet? How about this one? Or this one? Or this bullshit contraption? Well, do these pictures match? No, most of it's computer generated. Or straight out of file photos. There's just so much propaganda. And 1 minute they're saying Russia attacked a energy infrastructure. Next they say, no, it was a civilian building. They can't make up their mind. Of course, they never mentioned that one of that drone was jammed and it just kept on going in a straight line. There's no intelligence to their reporting. It's all propaganda. But they're so focused on making people feel good, right? These people profit off selling misery, of reporting to you that we're slaughtering thousands of Russians. They're losing. You know, this is a wonder weapon. It may be not a flashy fighter jet, but this machine represents victory, I tell you. Victory! The orcs! We are killing the orcs! We're depriving them of power, but as soon as Russia retaliates, it's, ooh, they're so cool, it's not fair. And I know people are tuning out, and I know where people tune out, but at the moment, it's not bothering me, because they're cowards. They don't want to face the truth. People who watch these kinds of channels don't want to face the truth. Computer-generated slop. All pro-Ukrainian garbage. Funded by Ukrainian government with your tax dollars. Now, it may not mean anything to you, and it doesn't mean much to me, but for some reason, Slavyansk is an important town to the people of DPR, and the fact that they're not talking about this is DPR. This is not the Russian army. This is the DPR. This is what people forget about this war. Okay? That Russia is backing an army of civilians, well, predominantly was civilians, most of whom now have fought for over a decade against Ukrainian oppression. Right? And you've seen it, right? You look, how many liberals support, right? I'm not just talking about Hassan Piker. I mean, liberals in general are supporting the Ayatollah Khomeini or Venezuela, right? But wait a minute. Or saying hands off Cuba. Wait a minute. They're all Russian allies. Yet here we have the same situation in Kosovo, right? Right? Allegedly. Right? The people of Kosovo allegedly rebelled against Serbia. A lie. Right? But here we have the people of Donetsk rebelling against Ukraine. And there's no support. It's all about narratives. And the right is being led by the nose, not putting enough pressure on Trump. And it's got to be done. Because if you want to be on the right side of history, you have to end looking at things through political lenses. You have to be free of propaganda. You have to be factual. Now, Savansk means something to these people. To them, it's a liberation. And this is key, is the fall of Kosovokia. Progress there has been seen as the Ukrainian forces are trying to hold on to the reservoir, taking control of the reservoir, frees up the water that Ukraine has been denying to the people in the south. There is no morality in war, but when you make it even... You make immorality your methodology of fighting war. You have no moral grounds to stand on. You are not fighting the Russians because they're an existential threat to our existence or even to Europe. You're fighting the Russians in Ukraine because Barack Obama was told to fight the Russians in Ukraine. Because the marching orders were given to fight. And Trump was... and this is the problem with foreign treaties. They make America vulnerable to endless wars, where you are constantly upholding all these treaties. Defend Europe, but Europe won't defend itself. Defend Ukraine. Why? Because we made them give up their nuclear weapons and made them vulnerable to the Russians. But their actions made them vulnerable to the Russians. You are not holding Ukraine accountable for their actions. Instead, you are making weapon companies profitable, and people are lining up to watch war profiteers lie to you because you want to be lied to. I don't mean you. I mean the people who watch these dickheads lie. If I had no morals and no scruples, I would be I'd just be making non-stop videos on, oh, Russia is losing, oh, they're so terrible, Putin is the liar. And people be slapping it up. But that's giving in to the liberal establishment. Yes, I would get my channel way recommended. Why do you think these channels get hundreds of thousands of views? Because they're recommended. People are idiots and don't realise that most of the recommended channels are there because the establishment makes sure they're there. These people are funded by the establishment. But there is a genuine energy crisis in Ukraine. And they can't produce enough power in Europe to subsidise Ukraine. It's causing a death of European industry. But for now, right, thanks to a decline in global demand, primarily because of the unspecified causes of death, reducing the population, taking the pressure off the establishment, and none felt bigger than the cuts to, none have felt it worse than India or South Korea, but ultimately, Ukraine is millions of people now, has a population less, right? They've lost millions, and now the so-called wonder weapon that was going to win the war for Ukraine is being used against them. And now the thing that was going to save them, that is American weapons, for now are not as effective. Now, I can't say why the numbers, right, don't add up. There's supposed to be 100 and something Humvees and M2s. Over 1,000 Humvees and over 100 M2s. But every day they're losing, right? And after 1,000 days of war, the amount of equipment in Ukraine obviously has to be down. Now, according to, is it Skywatch or Airwatch? Over 700 flights just from America alone are still going to Ukraine. So, obviously, deliveries, and according to Military Watch, those are paid for by Europe, are going on. So, yeah, Ukraine is totally dependent on US deliveries right now. There are no deliveries from Europe. They're not coming from Europe. There's almost nothing coming overland out of Poland. most of the people who come out of Poland, the trainees, are dead by the end of the week. And nobody wants to talk about it. The fact that Ukraine, specifically Zelensky, is sending men endlessly into the meat grinder just so he can stay in office. But this, I don't buy into the whole narrative that Ukraine is defending itself. I really don't. But the majority are slowly losing the faith in their governments, and they are questioning the narratives. But for now, you can see, right, Russia has advanced high-tech night vision, mostly using what's commonly called a low-light filter, but it's effective and it works, and it's cheap. Of course, it's blurry, but if you're just looking for a target, any target, and it's on the battlefield, it's a legitimate target as far as they're concerned. Now, Ukraine runs most of the ammunition in private cars. So that's why you see figures sometimes like 3 Humvees and 75 vehicles. That's because ammunition and ambulances are counted as vehicles. But you don't know which is which. They just see them on the battlefield and drop on them. That's a delivery drone, by the way. Tracked delivery drones, antennas, relay stations, Starlink. Target. Boom. Yeah. I mean, there. Care package. Just bundle up some C4. Doesn't have to be fancy. Doesn't have to be well presented. Doesn't have to be encased. In fact, it should be encased. I mean, technically, to ensure maximum detonation of an explosive, you compress the explosion to ensure that the first shock waves, at least some of them, bounce in. Plus, it gives you added shrapnel. But these are just bags of grenades. Simple, sometimes, just a bag of grenades. A simple, yet effective weapon. Right, now Rubicon is the code name for Russia's drone kill program. They snipe high-value targets on the battlefield. Drone launching sites, forward command positions, spotters, things that Ukrainian army need desperately, particularly artillery spotters, because as soon as there's an alert of artillery, those spotters have to gather information live, so that because they can't wait for satellite timing, they can't wait for overflights. They have to know live as they're firing if they're hitting the target, or they have to adjust. And without those spotters, they can't adjust their fire. So they end up shooting off only a few rounds and then moving, and end of story. Now, both sides are still using manned snipers instead of drones. Now, these snipers, of course, are often targeting each other or their spotters, artillery spotters, and forward observers. Without forward observers, somebody's got to sneak up and see where the enemy is. You can't always rely on recon units. Recon units and patrols are great when you've got big jungles and forests and, lots of cover. But out in the Ukrainian fields, a patrol, pop, and the sniper could take out the entire unit. So they send few. So this is why armies are often fought by fewer and fewer men, which is technically a good thing, right? The fewer the better, right? Ideally, you would put Biden and Putin in a ring and start betting on the outcome. it is what it is. These men carry a high velocity, often the Russian equivalent of a 7.62 or sometimes 12.7. They often use a longer standard than the standard rifle round. Higher velocity, lower trajectory. Often to, even though you hear the crack, it's too late because they're supersonic bullets. Because the vast distance, they don't have to worry about sound. They're only going to fire one shot and then they're going to move on to the next target. Now, often these snipers are moving around for days before they get into position. And again, it's about high-value targets, right? Artillery spotters, radiomen, forward observers, officers. Every day, right, Ukrainian loses around 70% of its casualties, where Russia loses 30%. So if you're looking at about 1,000 men per day dying, with the majority being Ukrainian. Often they say in war the highest casualties are civilian, and that's usually because we're bombing factories, we're bombing, both sides are bombing factories, both sides are bombing infrastructure. People have got to go in. You know, a lot of electricians die trying to repair these electricity transformers. Often, particularly Ukraine, has targeted ambulances and emergency responders. Now, Russia has vowed revenge on these war crimes, particularly after the latest killing of a emergency responder in Donetsk, allegedly a car bomb. Saboteurs set off a car bomb, killing an ambulance officer just because he was Russian. But he was an ethnic Russian from Donetsk. But because he's a rebel, again, you know, he's a marked man. And I'm like, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean we in America said, all right, those in rebellion against the US government are now marked men, right? They're not protesters. They're rebels. We could, you know, this is the problem. The left have no morality. Everything is through the lens of politics, right? There's no consistency. Until you do away with these until people give up these god-awful propaganda feel-good moments, right? It's like, stop getting horny over the death of Russians and start realizing, you know, that these wars are stripping you of your rights, right? Your rights end. Remember, they declare war. Men have no rights. You know, Ukraine is now a prison camp. And it is a dying... and it's easy to see why, right? Compare the size of Germany to Ukraine. Pretty comparable. France is slightly smaller. Right? Spain, it's one of the biggest countries in Europe. But of course, Europe is tiny it's a tiny peninsula of Russia. You know, a tiny peninsula. And Europe just cannot get out of its own shadow of fear, right? They see they're in the shadow of the giant mountain, and so they fear the mountain. So they start chipping away at it. And then one day they'll realize that mountain is protecting them from a worse, right? That Russian mountain protected Europe for hundreds of years and bore the brunt of the Mongols, who eventually established a foothold by moving further south and coming up through Turkey. But still, the Russians bolstered the armies, right, of Hungary, you know, these volunteer knights. But they couldn't return to Russia. That's how Kiev was formed. Okay, Castle Kiev, and eventually Ukraine, the land between. Right, it was like a place for exiles or people who was sent on one. We need to make sure our western flanks are protected, but we can't if Europe had only gotten out of its own way sooner, but no, war profiteers. And until people can reconcile their beliefs and understand that, the lobbyists like the ADL are our enemies, our banks are run by our enemies, the migrants are our invaders, they are our enemies. But no, we got to cling to some ideal of utopia, that paradise is just one submission away. We'll just have to submit and we can live in peace and harmony. A life on your knees is not a life. It's like appeasing a woman. It's never ending, right? When they get their way, they just want more, I tell you. But the Ukraine war is coming to an end. People are turning against it. France today has reported that more young people support Russia's victory in Ukraine and refuse to go to war than those who are supporting Ukraine. And the irony is, of course, as I reported before, those who support Ukraine want to send others to war. They won't fight their own wars. And in fact, Jews are leaving France so they can't be conscripted to fight France's wars in Ukraine. But these are the wars you wanted. You should be fighting your wars. But no, they won't fight their wars. They always round up conscripts and send others to do their dirty work while they move to another country. And they can only do that because of all your subsidies. So, you got to cut people off, man. It's not charity. It's theft. They're living the life of Riley while you have to struggle from paycheck to paycheck every time. Meaning you can't accumulate anything for your retirement. Making you dependent of the government. There's another word for dependents. Slaves. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree description below or in my profile. Thank you, see you in the next video, and bye for now.